My name is Ava Morgan, and by the time I turned 24, I had already learned how deeply wounds can hide behind quiet smiles. On the day I stood in line for graduation, in my black robe and cap stitched with borrowed hope, no one would have guessed what that moment truly meant to me. Beside me stood Chloe, my younger sister by 2 years, dressed in a matching gown and radiating the same effortless charm she always had. We were both graduating from the same university. But only one of us had been given everything. The other had to build her future from scraps. From the outside, the Morgan family looked stable, even idyllic. We lived in a tidy, 2-story home in suburban Michigan. Our parents, Gregory and Marianne, had stable jobs, family photos on the walls, and a holiday card sent out every December. But appearances never told the whole truth. Inside that house, praise was currency, and I was always overdrawn. Chloe, with her golden curls and magnetic presence, was the child they invested in. The one they told the world about. The one they saved for. I was the independent one, the resilient daughter who didn't need much. That was their excuse for giving me so little. Even as a child, the inequality was obvious. On Christmas mornings, Chloe unwrapped the latest gadgets and art kits, while I received clearance rack pajamas or school supplies. "You're practical," Mom would say with a tight smile, as if that explained why her love came with fewer ribbons. My father rarely looked up from his phone long enough to notice what I was doing. Unless it involved Chloe. Then he had opinions, guidance, pride. And when I excelled, when I brought home perfect report cards, regional science fair medals, math competition wins, the response was always the same. "That's nice, Ava. Did you help Chloe with her English assignment yet?" By the time I was 17, I had grown used to the silence that followed my accomplishments. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop, studied late into the night, and taught myself financial literacy from library books. Chloe joined the debate team and received standing ovations at family dinners. I won the State Entrepreneurship Award, and my mother said, "Be sure to let your sister know when dinner's ready." College applications arrived like thunder. Chloe and I, though 2 years apart in age, were graduating together because she had skipped a grade. We both applied to Westbridge University, a top-tier school with fierce competition. When my acceptance letter arrived, I held it in my hands like a lifeline. "I got in," I said at the dinner table, holding the thick envelope with trembling hands. My father didn't look up. "That's good, Ava." Mom nodded. "We'll need to make sure Chloe gets hers too." Minutes later, Chloe burst through the door, her envelope already torn open. "I got in," she screamed. The transformation was immediate. My father jumped from his chair, scooped her up, and spun her around. My mother cried. Champagne was opened. Dinner was forgotten. 2 weeks later, we sat down for a rare full family dinner. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would finally recognize both of us equally. That hope shattered quickly. "We've been saving for Chloe's college since she was born," my father began, eyes fixed on her. "Westbridge is expensive, but we'll cover everything so you can focus on your studies." I waited. Seconds passed. No one looked at me. "What about me?" I finally asked. The pause was suffocating. Gregory cleared his throat. "Ava, we only have enough for one. Chloe's always shown more promise. We believe she's the better investment." I don't remember finishing the meal. I remember my hands shaking. I remember my mother saying, "You're strong. You'll figure it out." And I remember the words that broke something inside me. "She deserves it, Ava. You don't." That night, I cried for the girl who still hoped she could earn love. I stared at the ceiling of my room, trying to understand how parents could look at 2 daughters and choose one so easily. By morning, I knew I had only one option: do it all myself. I drove 2 hours to Grandma Ruth's house, the only person who had ever seen me for more than what I lacked. She didn't have money to give, only hands that held mine tightly and a voice that reminded me of who I was. "You go to Westbridge anyway," she said. "Even if you have to crawl." I promised her I would. And I kept that promise. The next weeks blurred into a frenzy of scholarship applications, late-night paperwork, loan documents, and financial aid meetings. Miss Patel, my high school counselor, stayed after hours to help me. "You're one of the most determined students I've ever seen," she said, as we submitted the 25th scholarship form. I received enough small grants and loans to scrape together my first year. Not enough for dorms, but enough for tuition. While Chloe prepared her color-coded dorm decorations with my parents' help, I found a shared apartment 40 minutes from campus with 3 strangers and broken plumbing. My job at the bookstore was secured within a week, and I picked up shifts at a local cafe on weekends. No parties. No welcome dinner. Just spreadsheets, resumes, and duct tape for the kitchen sink. The night before move-in day, my mother handed me a set of old twin sheets. "They're clean," she said, as if that was enough. On campus, Chloe moved into her suite-style dorm while my 10-year-old Honda wheezed into the off-campus lot. I carried my belongings alone up 3 flights of stairs. No family photo for Instagram. No teary hugs goodbye. Before she left, my mother waved and said, "Good luck, Ava. I hope this all works out." That was the last thing she said to me before driving off with Chloe. What they didn't understand, what they never even asked, was that this wasn't something I hoped would work out. It was something I would make work. No matter what it cost me. My new apartment smelled of mildew and fried onions, a scent that clung to the air no matter how often I opened the windows. The wallpaper peeled in long strips like forgotten promises. My mattress was thin and secondhand, and the kitchen faucet leaked with an irregular drip that mocked my exhaustion. But it was mine. I had carved out a space in the world, and I intended to survive in it. That first night, as traffic groaned outside and my new roommates argued behind closed doors, I lay staring at the cracked ceiling and wondered how I would make it through even one semester. The doubts crept in quietly. Could I balance 30 hours of work each week with a full course load of business classes? Would I collapse under the pressure, fail out, and prove my parents right? But just as those thoughts began to spiral, my phone vibrated. A message from Grandma Ruth appeared on the screen, short and fierce. "Diamonds are made under pressure. You're already shining. Keep going, my brave girl." I closed my eyes and repeated those words like a prayer. Then I pulled out my planner and mapped my entire week, hour by hour. There would be no room for error. No space for doubt. Every second mattered. My first semester at Westbridge hit like a tidal wave. I woke at 5 every morning, studied for 2 hours, then sprinted to my cafe shift. After work, I attended lectures, took notes on the go, and recorded sessions to replay while I stocked books during my evening shift. My professors didn't know the difference between me and my wealthier classmates, but I did. They wore designer shoes and spoke of weekend getaways. I counted every dollar in the campus bookstore, choosing between textbooks and groceries. Still, I submitted every assignment on time. I refused to be anything less than excellent. On a gray October morning, something shifted. Professor Lin, my business ethics instructor, stopped me after class. "Your analysis on resource allocation and family business structure, it was remarkable," she said. "You've clearly lived some of this theory." I didn't know how to respond. Praise wasn't something I was used to receiving, let alone from someone whose opinion I respected. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out with my heart pounding. For the first time, I felt seen, not for being resilient, but for being brilliant. But brilliance wasn't enough to buy groceries. Midterms arrived with mounting bills. I rationed meals, sometimes choosing instant noodles over sleep. When my cafe tips were short, I skipped lunch. I learned to read while commuting and memorized formulas during 5-minute bathroom breaks. I turned exhaustion into momentum and hunger into discipline. Every test I passed, every project I submitted, was a quiet act of defiance. I would not be erased. Then something unexpected happened. One night, I returned to the apartment to find a plastic container on the fridge shelf labeled with my name. Inside was a full meal: rice, chicken, vegetables. Warmth I hadn't tasted in weeks. I turned to find my roommate Maya leaning on the kitchen counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You can't live like this," she said. "You'll collapse." I tried to smile. "I've managed so far." "No. You've survived so far," she replied. "There's a difference." That conversation was the beginning of something I hadn't dared to hope for, a new kind of family. Maya began cooking extra portions, slipping flashcards under my door, and blocking out noise when she knew I was studying. When she discovered I'd been skipping meals to afford books, she made a rule: if she cooked, I ate. No negotiation. She didn't pity me. She simply chose to stand beside me. That choice was louder than any apology my parents had ever given. As fall turned to winter, my schedule only grew tighter. But now, I had small comforts. Hot meals. A clean mug waiting when I came home late. And a friend who reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone in this brutal rhythm. Then came the collapse. Just after winter break, the cafe reduced hours. A new manager, budget cuts. I lost half my income overnight. My rent loomed. My tuition deadline approached. I was 2 weeks away from losing everything I had clawed to keep. I ran to the financial aid office, hands shaking, and pleaded for help. Miss Hawthorne, a sharp-eyed woman with a clipboard always in hand, took one look at my record and nodded. "You qualify for an emergency academic grant," she said. "And Professor Lin has submitted a recommendation for a research assistantship." I stared at her. "A what?" "Pays better than the cafe," she replied, already pulling forms. "And your professor believes you're ready." The assistantship became my lifeline. I worked with Professor Lin on a study about business resilience during economic downturns. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living the very research we compiled. But the hours were flexible, the work meaningful, and for the first time, I earned enough to stop skipping meals. The grant paid my rent. The job paid my dignity. Spring arrived, and with it, clarity. I had survived my first year. More than that, I had thrived. My GPA remained flawless. I had a respected role in the business department. I had my own calendar, my own rules, my own fire. And I had Maya. When I told her I wanted to start a side business, she didn't laugh. She sat beside me, opened her laptop, and said, "Okay. Let's build this thing." That night, between spreadsheet tabs and midnight tea, we launched a simple website offering virtual assistant services to small businesses. Nothing fancy, just clear offerings, transparent pricing, and my own hard-earned expertise. Within a month, I had 3 clients. Within 2, I quit the bookstore. My time was now mine to invest, and I was betting on myself. The girl who moved in with cracked furniture and a broken heart had become a business owner. But I wasn't finished yet. By the beginning of sophomore year, the rhythm of my life had become both brutal and strangely empowering. I no longer flinched when my alarm buzzed at 5. I didn't dread the packed schedule. My calendar was full, yes, but it was full of things I had chosen. Business classes that challenged me. Client meetings that sharpened my instincts. Hours in Professor Lin's office, analyzing real data that mattered. And slowly, word of what I was building began to spread. What had started as a virtual assistant service had now evolved. I wasn't just doing email management or scheduling, I was running small marketing campaigns, redesigning client websites, helping local businesses find their voice online. One of my earliest clients, a family-owned bookstore in Detroit, tripled their foot traffic after I implemented a campaign on social media. Another, a home bakery, saw their orders triple when I helped them establish an online store. I was still working out of a cramped bedroom with a desk made from stacked crates. But my business was real. And it was working. Professor Lin noticed. One afternoon, she pulled me aside after class and said, "Have you considered applying for the innovation grant? It's competitive, but your business model is unique and impactful." I blinked. Me? But that's for. She cut me off with a sharp look. For exactly someone like you. With her mentorship, I began refining my business plan. Nights blurred into mornings as I analyzed financials, crafted vision statements, and wrote proposals that sounded more confident than I felt. Maya helped edit every sentence, highlighting every awkward phrase in neon yellow until I laughed just to keep from crying. The deadline came. I submitted. I waited. Then came the acceptance. I was invited to present my business at the statewide Student Innovation Forum, a competitive showcase where students pitched their ideas to panels of entrepreneurs, investors, and faculty. The prize? Funding. Exposure. Recognition. Everything my parents had said I wasn't worthy of. As the forum approached, I told no one back home. There was no point. Gregory and Marianne still only called me on holidays, and when they did, they asked more about Chloe's sorority than my business. "It's good you're keeping busy," my mother would say. "We're proud of both our girls." The lie landed like ash in my mouth. They weren't proud. They were oblivious. I didn't need their pride. I just wanted to show them what they had missed. The Innovation Forum was held in a sleek auditorium on the edge of campus. I arrived early, carrying only a flash drive and the belief that everything I had survived had led to this moment. The room was buzzing with confidence, students in tailored blazers, parents snapping photos, mentors offering last-minute encouragement. I stood alone. My turn came. I stepped onto the stage and plugged in my presentation. The lights dimmed. The judges watched. For 12 minutes, I told them everything. Not just the business model, but the story behind it. The girl who worked 2 jobs to stay in school. The local businesses that were overlooked by big platforms. The need for affordable, flexible marketing solutions in underserved communities. I finished. The room was quiet. Then came the applause. 3 hours later, I was announced as one of 3 finalists. 2 rounds of judging followed over the next month. I met with mentors from national firms, answered tough questions about scalability, automation, and future growth. I had no fancy office or startup capital. But I had results. Real ones. And passion that couldn't be faked. When they finally announced the winner, I was in the middle of my shift at the bookstore. My phone buzzed. I checked the notification. Then checked it again. I had won $50,000 in grant funding. A feature in the Regional Entrepreneurship Journal. A standing offer for mentorship from one of the panel's investors. I ran to the back room and stood there, shaking, staring at the message on the screen. Then I dialed Grandma Ruth. Her voice crackled with emotion. "You did it, Ava. You did it." Later that night, Maya and I sat on the floor, drinking ginger ale from plastic mugs and eating takeout noodles. She raised her cup in a toast. "To the girl who builds her own tables," she said. I laughed. "And never begs for a seat." By junior year, the grant had allowed me to officially register my business, hire 2 interns from the university, and move into a small co-working space off campus. My reputation grew. So did my confidence. I spoke up in class more. I challenged bad data and proposed better models. Professors took notice. Students began asking for help on their own projects. The invisible girl from freshman year was now a name that circulated with respect. Meanwhile, Chloe remained distant. She sent the occasional message, usually a meme or a "good luck on finals." She was busy with her social world, her leadership roles in student government, her polished life. We existed in parallel lanes, intersecting only when necessary. Until November. One rainy Tuesday, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and found Chloe standing there, drenched and pale, clutching a laptop and a thick folder of notes. "I'm failing," she said without preamble. "My senior thesis is a mess. I don't understand the methodology. My professor says I might not graduate." I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on my bed, wiping rain from her forehead, and looked at me like I was the last raft in a rising flood. "Help me," she whispered. My first instinct was to say no. This was the sister who had been handed everything. Who had watched me struggle without asking why. Who had never once stood up for me at the dinner table when our parents compared us like school projects. But then I saw it, the crack in her voice, the defeat in her shoulders. And I remembered something else. I had been her once. I sat down beside her. "Show me what you have." For the next 2 weeks, we worked together every night. I taught her how to structure arguments, analyze sources, and track data. We rewrote her outline. Scrapped her draft. Started again. She listened. She learned. And one evening, after hours of editing, she looked at me and said, "How did you do it? All of this, your business, your grades. No help." I told her. Everything. The sleepless nights. The skipped meals. The broken car. The job rejections. The rejections from our own parents. Chloe was quiet for a long time. "They always said you were fine," she said finally. "That you were managing." I didn't know. "Because you never asked," I replied. She flinched. Then nodded. "I'm asking now." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. And I had waited my entire life for someone in that house to finally see me. Winter melted into spring, and with it came a wave of recognition that I never anticipated. My agency now served a dozen small businesses across the state. My name began circulating in business school faculty meetings, not just as a student, but as an innovator. Professor Lin invited me to present my senior project early, an in-depth case study on resource scarcity and entrepreneurial resilience. Dean Holloway herself attended the presentation. 2 days later, I received an email. The university was selecting a student speaker for graduation. One representative from each school, and I had been chosen to represent the School of Business. I stared at the message for several minutes, rereading it again and again. Not because I didn't believe it. But because I did. This was real. My name was no longer a footnote. I was the voice of the graduating class. When I told Grandma Ruth, she gasped so loudly I had to hold the phone away. "You'll show them," she said, tears thick in her voice. "And you'll do it with grace." Grace. That was the hard part. What do you say to a crowd that includes the people who thought you'd fail? Who dismissed your drive as distraction? Who invested in your sibling and left you to climb on scraped knees? You speak the truth. The next weeks were a blur of preparation. I wrote and rewrote my speech a dozen times. Each version more raw, more honest. I practiced in front of Maya, who nodded silently, tears shining in her eyes after my final draft. "They're not ready," she whispered. But you are. Chloe helped too. By then, her thesis was not only salvaged but praised. Her advisor called it a surprising triumph. She credited me publicly, and privately, she apologized again and again. I didn't absolve her. But I allowed her in. And she began to show up. She turned down a lavish graduation gift from our parents, saying she wanted to start fresh. She began visiting Grandma Ruth more often. And most importantly, she started telling the truth. At least to herself. The days ticked by. Finals ended. Gowns were pressed. Our parents arrived in town 2 days before the ceremony. They rented a house and invited the extended family. The group chats exploded with excitement. A dinner was planned. Decorations were ordered. I wasn't included in the planning. I received a generic invitation only after Chloe insisted I be acknowledged. We assumed you'd be busy with work, my mother texted. The sting didn't land like it used to. My armor had grown too thick. Their omission no longer had the power to wound me. But Chloe's frustration did. They still don't get it, she said bitterly. Everything you've built, and they treat you like an afterthought. I smiled calmly. They're not my audience anymore. Graduation day dawned bright and sharp, the kind of clear Michigan morning that made everything feel like possibility. I dressed carefully, smoothing the soft folds of my gown, adjusting the cap until it sat straight. I wrapped Grandma Ruth's embroidered stole around my shoulders and looked in the mirror. The girl I saw was not the one they had underestimated. She was the product of fire and grit and quiet rebellion. She was the woman I had become in defiance of their neglect. Maya drove me to campus in her little silver sedan, honking at every traffic light. We laughed the whole way. Chloe met me at the robing area. She hugged me tightly. You ready? She asked. I've been ready for 4 years, I said. Inside the auditorium, thousands of guests filled the rows. Balloons, camera flashes, excited chatter. The air buzzed with pride. The families of my classmates waved signs and flowers. I searched for Grandma Ruth and found her near the front. She sat with her spine straight, her cane resting beside her, her eyes fixed on the stage. My parents sat 2 seats away, flanked by cousins and aunts. Chloe waved at them from our lineup, but I didn't. I didn't need to. We were called up one by one to receive our degrees. Applause echoed after each name. When mine was read, Ava Morgan, Bachelor of Business Administration, highest honors, I heard it. Grandma Ruth's signature whistle. Chloe grinned from behind me, giving a thumbs up as I returned to my seat. Then came the moment. President Kingsley returned to the podium, his voice booming across the room. Before we conclude, it is my honor to welcome a student who represents not only academic excellence, but the spirit of resilience we aim to instill in every graduate. Please join me in welcoming Ava Morgan, of the School of Business, this year's student speaker. I stood slowly and made my way to the stage. And I began. When I arrived at Westbridge 4 years ago, I didn't have a dorm room, or a car that worked properly, or parents cheering in the parking lot. What I had was a dream, and a job application. The room hushed. I worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load. I borrowed textbooks, skipped meals, and built a business out of late nights and free Wi-Fi. I know what it means to build something from nothing. To create a seat at a table that was never set for you. A quiet rustle moved through the crowd. My words weren't flowery. They were sharp. Clean. Unapologetic. I am not the only student who has overcome silence, doubt, or neglect. Some of us walked here alone. But we made it. We proved that worth is not granted by birthright or approval. It's carved with intention. I paused, letting the silence settle. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. The greatest lesson Westbridge taught me wasn't in a lecture or a textbook. It was that success is not defined by what you're given. It's defined by what you create when no one is watching. When no one believes in you. I ended with a quiet nod. No grand flourish. Just truth. The applause erupted like thunder. I stepped down from the podium into a storm of clapping, cheers, and camera flashes. Chloe was on her feet, tears running freely. Grandma Ruth didn't stand, her knees wouldn't let her, but her smile lit up the entire front row. Then President Kingsley spoke again. And now, for a special recognition. He read aloud the honors I had received: top graduate, founder of a six-figure business, winner of the State Innovation Forum. But it was what came next that drew gasps. Ms. Morgan accomplished these milestones while fully self-financing her education, without parental support. Her story exemplifies not just excellence, but integrity and independence. I saw it happen. My father's face drained of color. My mother's smile faltered. And suddenly, everyone around them turned to look. Ava Morgan, the president concluded, has been offered a position with Cross & Walker Consulting, one of the nation's top strategy firms. Her business will be featured in next month's edition of Entrepreneur's Edge magazine. The auditorium rose. A standing ovation. I stood quietly in the center of it all, the light catching on Grandma Ruth's stole, my hands steady at my sides. And for the first time in my life, they saw me. Not as the second daughter. Not as the independent one. But as the one who had risen. The ceremony ended in a blur of movement, caps tossed, photos snapped, faculty embracing students like proud parents. But I stayed grounded, rooted in the feeling that had taken residence in my chest. I wasn't floating. I wasn't euphoric. I was anchored in something deeper. I had stood in front of thousands and declared the truth out loud. And no one, especially not the people who had tried to silence it, could take it back. Outside the auditorium, clusters of families gathered for hugs and congratulations. My classmates posed with balloons and champagne. Chloe found me first, arms wide and eyes red from crying. She pulled me into a fierce hug and whispered, "I've never been so proud of anyone in my life." I held her tighter than I expected to. Her pride mattered now, not because I needed it, but because she offered it without conditions. Grandma Ruth came next. Maya wheeled her through the crowd, her cane forgotten in favor of comfort. "You did it, my girl," she said as I knelt beside her. "And you did it your way." Her eyes gleamed like glass in sunlight. She kissed my forehead and added, "They saw it, Ava. They saw you." And then, inevitably, came my parents. They lingered on the edge of the crowd, awkward and hesitant. Gregory in his stiff navy suit, Marianne in a floral dress far too loud for the moment. They looked like guests at a celebration they hadn't helped plan. Strangers at their own daughter's triumph. My father stepped forward first, a grin pasted onto his face like a mask. "Well," he said, voice too loud, "that was quite a surprise. You've really been holding out on us, haven't you?" I blinked at him. "No. I've just been working." My mother reached for my arm. "We're so proud of you, Ava. All your hard work. It's really paid off." I smiled tightly. That's the thing about hard work. It tends to. Before they could respond, Chloe inserted herself between us. "Everyone's been talking about Ava's speech," she said brightly, too loudly. It was the most powerful moment of the whole ceremony. Her arm looped around my waist. And imagine, she did it all with no help. None. Imagine what she could have done with the support you gave me. My mother flinched. My father's jaw clenched. Uncle Leo and Aunt Valerie approached just in time to catch the moment. "We had no idea she was running a business," Uncle Leo said. Why didn't you ever mention it at family dinners? There was a long, weighted silence. We thought she was managing fine, Gregory muttered. She was surviving, Chloe corrected sharply. There's a difference. I glanced at Grandma Ruth, who gave me a tiny, satisfied nod. She didn't say a word, but her presence spoke volumes. She was my proof. My pillar. Later that evening, we were invited to the rented house my parents had secured for the family dinner. I debated whether to go. The reception hosted by the business school had been elegant, full of mentors and peers who had watched me grow into the woman I now was. I didn't need another round of shallow applause. But Grandma Ruth had a glint in her eye when she said, "Go. Let them see how far you've come. Not for them. For you." And so, we went. Maya, Chloe, Grandma Ruth, and I arrived together. When we entered, conversation faltered, and then quickly resumed, overcompensating. My mother greeted us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dinner's almost ready," she announced. "We're so glad you could make it, Ava." The table was long, too ornate for the rented space, decked with flowers and place cards. My seat was on the far end. Not at the head. Not beside them. Fitting. Dinner began with awkward toasts, praise lavished on Chloe, anecdotes of her childhood, stories carefully curated for comfort. When someone finally raised a glass for me, it was Uncle Leo. "To the woman of the hour," he said. "Who built a company, earned top honors, and gave a speech no one will forget. Ava Morgan, proof that success doesn't always come from support. Sometimes it comes in spite of it." My father laughed nervously. "She's always been determined. She's always been invisible to you," Aunt Valerie said flatly. A stunned silence followed. My mother dropped her fork. "Let's not make this about the past," Gregory said, his voice strained. "We're here to celebrate." "Yes," I said, finally speaking. "We're here to celebrate. But not just achievement. We're celebrating truth. Because it matters." My mother opened her mouth to respond, but Chloe beat her to it. "You chose to believe in me because I was easy to believe in." Ava had to prove herself every step of the way. And now she surpassed all of us. My parents looked genuinely stunned. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to hurt you." "Intentions don't erase impact," I said quietly. "But I'm not here for apologies." "What are you here for, then?" Gregory asked, arms crossed. I stood, holding my glass, not for a toast, but as a statement. "I'm here to honor the people who believed in me when you didn't. The ones who saw potential before profit. Strength before polish. Grit before grace." I turned to Grandma Ruth. "I'm here because of her. Because of Maya. Because of Chloe, who eventually saw me. I built something without you. And that's what we're celebrating." I placed the glass down and turned to leave. Grandma Ruth rose beside me, her hand slipping into mine. "We're going," she said. "I want to be with people who earned the right to be part of her life." Chloe followed, without hesitation. We walked out of that house with heads held high, leaving behind the stories they had told themselves. Stories where I was lesser. We didn't slam the door. We didn't burn the bridge. We simply stepped off it. Because I had already built a better one. The week after graduation moved quickly, but I moved with purpose. I signed the employment contract with Cross and Walker Consulting and finalized the lease on a modest but sunlit apartment near their downtown office. Using part of my business competition winnings, I furnished it myself, nothing flashy, just a space that finally felt like mine. Each item I chose held intention. A bookshelf, because I had once learned everything from borrowed pages. A small framed quote from Grandma Ruth, embroidered in deep thread, You were never asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong people. My business, now a fully registered digital marketing agency, continued to grow. I appointed 2 of my interns as part-time project leads, offering fair wages and mentorship in return for their dedication. They were students like I had been, resourceful, overworked, and underestimated. I didn't just want to grow the business. I wanted to build something that could sustain and uplift others like me. Entrepreneur's Edge magazine followed through with the promised feature. They ran a 2-page spread with a photo of me, Chloe, and Grandma Ruth taken at the business school reception. The headline read, "The Self-Made Graduate Redefining Success." The article told my story not as a tragedy, but as a triumph of design over circumstance. I mailed copies to Professor Lynn, Dean Holloway, and Ms. Hawthorne, each one annotated with a personal note of thanks. 2 weeks later, my parents invited me to lunch. They suggested a neutral cafe halfway between their rental and my office. I accepted, cautiously. When I arrived, they were already seated, their expressions uncertain. There were no congratulations, no celebratory energy. Just the heavy atmosphere of people who realized too late what they had missed. Marianne spoke first. "We've been thinking about the way things played out. About you." Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "You exceeded all our expectations." I raised an eyebrow. "Maybe your expectations were the problem." He nodded, slowly. "Yes. They were." My mother's eyes were rimmed with regret. "We thought we were being practical. That Chloe was the safer bet. You were so independent, we told ourselves you didn't need us." "I did," I said simply. "I just stopped waiting." There was no anger left. Only clarity. "We'd like to try to build something different," Gregory said. "If you're open to it." I took a deep breath. "If we do that, it has to be based on truth." "You favored her. You ignored me. That shaped me. I'm not here to pretend it didn't happen. I'm here to see if you're capable of knowing who I am now." Marianne's lip trembled. "We'd like to try." That was all I needed for now. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just the willingness to meet me in the present, without dragging the ghost of the girl they didn't choose into the room. Back home, I found Chloe waiting at my apartment with takeout. She had just accepted a role at a nonprofit focused on education equity, a choice that surprised me but felt right. We sat on my small balcony, eating spring rolls in silence until she finally said, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I sipped my tea before answering. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a decision I make every day not to carry the weight they left on me. Some days it's easier than others. She nodded. "For what it's worth, I think their biggest loss wasn't your silence. It was not knowing who you were all that time." I didn't respond. I just leaned back and watched the city lights blink on one by one, each one a small miracle of resilience. Later that summer, I returned to Grandma Ruth's lake house for a weekend. The same house where she had first told me I saw the world differently. She greeted me at the porch with a weathered wooden box and said, "This has waited long enough." Inside was a silver bracelet with a delicate clasp and a small engraving. "To the girl who kept going." "It belonged to my grandmother," she said. "And then my mother. I saved it for the granddaughter who would understand what it really meant to earn something." She fastened it on my wrist. My hands trembled slightly. "You became someone they couldn't imagine," she said softly. "That's not revenge. That's evolution." Her words echoed in my chest as I lay awake that night, listening to the quiet lap of the lake against the dock. My journey had started in a home where I was a shadow. And now, I had stepped fully into the light. But I wanted more than personal healing. I wanted legacy. 1 year after graduation, I returned to Westbridge University. Not as a student, but as a benefactor. With the support of Cross and Walker, my business profits, and matching funds from the Innovation Grant Foundation, I established the Ava Morgan Resilience Scholarship. It would be awarded annually to a student who, like me, had financed their education through hardship, who had overcome the odds with no family safety net. I sat in the back of the award ceremony, watching the first recipient, an accounting student with 2 part-time jobs and guardianship of her younger siblings, take the stage. She reminded me of who I had been. Only this time, she would have what I hadn't. Support. Recognition. A safety net built by someone who understood. Afterward, my parents approached. Gregory shook my hand. Marianne hugged me carefully. You created something meaningful, she said. I know, I replied. That was always the point. They stayed at the edge of the crowd, letting me have the moment. For once, they didn't try to claim it. I stood with Grandma Ruth and Chloe, both of them beaming. You didn't just rise, Chloe said. You lifted others with you. And that, more than any applause or award, was the measure of what I had built. I had once been the daughter left off the guest list. Now, I was the name on the plaque. Fall returned with the crisp scent of change in the air, and my days found a new rhythm. Weekdays were consumed with strategy meetings and client presentations at Cross and Walker Consulting. Evenings flowed into check-ins with my student team still running my agency, now thriving with a roster of loyal clients. And weekends, those sacred stretches of stillness, I spent with Grandma Ruth, with Chloe, or sometimes just by myself, reading, reflecting, rebuilding. What had once been frantic survival had shifted into steady purpose. During a Saturday hike with Chloe in the state forest north of the city, we paused at a lookout where the trees burned with color, red, amber, gold, defiant against the coming cold. Chloe picked up a small stone and turned it over in her hand before glancing at me. Do you think you'll ever completely forgive them? She asked. The question hung in the quiet air between us. I didn't answer right away. I watched a hawk spiral in the distance, free and focused. I think, I said slowly, forgiveness is less about erasing what happened and more about choosing what I carry forward. I won't forget what they said. What they didn't do. But I'm no longer waiting for them to give me something they're not capable of giving. Chloe nodded, her expression soft. I'm sorry you had to carry so much alone. You didn't know, I said simply. But now you do. That was enough. The truth was, I had stopped chasing their approval the moment I stood on that graduation stage. The applause that day had been thunderous, but what stayed with me was not the volume of the crowd. It was the quiet certainty I had earned it all without them. They had once told me I wasn't worth the investment. That I wasn't enough. And yet, I had built something enduring. By winter, my life had settled into a balance I never thought I'd have. The security I'd dreamed of for years was no longer a fantasy, it was a reality grounded in years of quiet discipline. My apartment felt lived in now. My calendar was filled with meetings that mattered, not ones designed to prove my worth. One day, while clearing out old files, I stumbled across a torn folder with copies of my original scholarship essays. The pages were marked with coffee stains and handwritten edits, the desperate voice of a younger version of me pleading for a chance. I sat on the floor with the papers in my lap and let the memory of her sink in. That girl, the one who had stayed up until dawn rewriting essays on borrowed laptops, who rationed food to afford textbooks, who walked past her parents' closed doors without knocking, she was still inside me. Not wounded anymore. Just wiser. She had been worth the investment all along. They just hadn't seen it. But she had. The following spring, Grandma Ruth's health began to decline. Slowly at first. Missed steps. Fatigue. A faint tremor in her hands that made her embroidery slower than usual. I drove out to the lake house more often, spending long afternoons on the porch, wrapped in blankets and shared memories. One afternoon, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note. Asterisk, you saw yourself clearly when others refused to look. That's the rarest kind of power. Never let them take that away from you again, asterisk. She passed peacefully in early June, with Chloe and me by her side. Her funeral was small but beautiful. I delivered the eulogy. I spoke not of her strength, though it was immense, but of her belief. How she chose to see people not by what they had, but by what they held inside. How she loved quietly, but fiercely. How her faith in me changed the trajectory of my life. Afterward, back at the lake house, Chloe and I sorted through Grandma's things. In the back of a drawer, we found a notebook filled with clipped articles, handwritten notes, and newspaper pages, every story about me, every award I'd won, every milestone I had reached. She followed everything, Chloe whispered. Even the ones you never mentioned. She never needed me to announce it, I said, smiling. She already knew. Weeks later, the university invited me to speak at the incoming student orientation. They had framed the Ava Morgan Resilience Scholarship plaque in the administrative building. Below my name was a quote pulled from my graduation address. Asterisk, success is not what you're given. It's what you create when no one is watching, asterisk. Standing in front of hundreds of new faces, I told them what I wish someone had told me when I first arrived. That their value wasn't measured in family approval or financial backing. That adversity could be a sharpening stone. That silence from those who should support you says more about their limits than yours. After the speech, a young woman approached me. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was strong. I'm here on your scholarship, she said. I work nights and take care of my younger brother. I didn't think I'd make it. But your story, your existence, makes me believe I might. I hugged her before she could walk away. Because that's what legacy is. Not statues. Not applause. It's becoming the kind of person who proves, by living, that others can rise too. As I walked home that evening, the sun setting behind the city skyline, I passed a group of girls in caps and gowns taking graduation photos. I smiled, and they waved. I wasn't just part of the story anymore. I was the story. A story of enoughness. A story of becoming. A story of a girl who built her own future from the pieces others left behind, and made it more beautiful than they ever could have imagined.